Goodness, it's good. I need to figure out how to turn that lady's voice off, because that's just something new that's happening and it's really annoying me.
You'll miss her if she goes, though.
I don't think I will. So,
You know, my British publisher has done an edition of a scarf, apparently with this image.
no.
Beautiful.
And I'm dying to see it.
Yeah, you need to
Yeah,
get
I
him
don't
to send
even
you
think
one.
I get one.
I was
I
gonna
think
say,
it's just for readers. I don't even get one.
no, you need to figure out how to get one of those. And there might be a couple people on here that might want one too. But anyways, I digress. But that beautiful paperback that Kevin was just showing us, I'm going to throw that for those of you that have already ordered it with us. We'll be sending those out to you tomorrow. But I will also be putting that into the chat so you can easily click on that. There's 2 selections you can make when you order a book from us. I always like to say, however there is to get a book, and get it from Warwick. So we could ship that to you, or if you're in the San Diego area, we'd love to see it at the store. Kevin and Lacy are going to chat for about 30-ish minutes. And so after they're done chatting, I'm going to bring questions in to them. So I see some people have already popped some things into the Q&A. So you can pop your questions into that function. If you scroll over your screen, you're going to see that Q&A box. So just go ahead and pop questions in there. We'll get to as many as we can. We might not be able to get to everything, but we will get to as many of those as we can. So Mission Viejo Library is our wonderful partner with us for this event this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and she's going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what's going on at Mission Viejo Library.
Thank you, Julie. Hey, everyone. It's so exciting to see everyone here tonight. I'm Allison from the Mission Viejo Library. For those of you who are not local to us, welcome. We are in South Orange County, and we are, gosh, there's a lot going on right now. It's been such a year, right? But we are open, like for real. You can just walk through our doors, which is, you know, yeah, like not normally unusual, but we all know how this year has gone. So we are open for just regular service, and simultaneously we're also open for curbside service because some of us still enjoy having things brought to our cars. So
Spoiled.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to go away. Like, now that all of us know how nice it is to have someone bring something to our car, it's like, please bring me all the things. So you have your choice of how to get books at the library. We're open Tuesday through Saturday, and you can check our website for all the hours and the details. And of course, give us a call or an email if you have any questions about what we're offering right now. We have some exciting things coming up. We have a Friends of the Library book sale. It's Saturday, June 12th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the Kershaw Garden, which is the lawn just outside the library. And everyone has been asking when the Friends of the Library bookstore would reopen. And so they're working on reopening to more regular hours. But for now, we have this big blowout book sale. So we hope to see you there on June 12th. And then we also have our summer reading program is coming June 15th to July 31st. We have reading for fun and prizes, of course, because everyone likes prizes. And we have programs designed for all ages. So again, just hop onto our website to get all the details about that. We're so excited. And follow us on Facebook if you're not following us already. We love our followers, and that is one of the best ways to keep up with everything that is happening at the Mission Viejo Library, including events like this one. We're so happy to partner with Warwick's on this wonderful event. So thank you, Julie, and welcome to Lacy and Kevin. It's so exciting to see you both here this evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison. We have a fan of the Mission Viejo Library. Amanda says she loves the curbside. It's such a blessing with the 2-year-old, and they love the Mission Viejo Library. So
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Allison, we'll see you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. And Kevin, you already have a comment from Jim that just wanted to say that they really do love the research that you do on your book. So we're going to take care of Jim's little comment right off the chute. So thank you, Jim, for that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me do my job, which is to introduce you to, and then we'll get the show rolling. So here we go. I think everybody here kind of knows, but I still have to, it's part of my job, right? So Kevin Kwan, one of our favorite authors, is the author of the international bestsellers Crazy Rich Asians, China Rich Girlfriend, and Rich People Problems. Crazy Rich Asians was a #1 New York Times bestseller and major motion picture, and has been translated into more than 30 languages. In 2018, Kevin was named by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. And we are thrilled that you are here today with us. We are celebrating the release of that beautiful book, the paperback release of Sex and Vanity. Can't wait to talk about that. And joining Kevin is Lacy Crawford, another one of our favorite authors who calls San Diego home here. Yay. And we were chatting before you all joined us about like all our favorite books. So sometimes the green room is like, that's where you get all the good stuff with what the good books are that are coming up, right? Lacy, and speaking of great books, Lacy is the author of fiction and nonfiction, including the satire Early Decision that came out in 2013 and the memoir Notes on a Silencing that came out last year. Notes on a Silencing was named a New York Times Editor's Choice and Notable Book, as well as a Best of Book 2020 by Time, People, NPR, Book Page, Library Journal, and LitHub. I'm going to be putting that in the chat as well. If you would like to order that, easily to click on that. Where was it? Lacy's work has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Narrative, LitHub, and Vanity Fair, and her literary journalism includes interviews and profiles of Frank Conroy, Reynolds Price, Jeffrey Wolfe, and Shirley Hauser. She lives here in San Diego with her husband and 3 children. You two have a great conversation. Can't wait. I'll be in the background. We'll pop back in about 30 minutes or so.
Thank you, Julie.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, this is our, I think, fourth event
This is
for
our
Warwick's.
fourth event for Warwick's, and I always feel that I have to justify being up on the dais with you by saying that I have to meet you in the basement room of the Tucson Book Festival in 2014, right? And so I think Crazy Rich Asians had been out for a few months by that point, and you were just beginning this banana swell, you know, that hasn't subsided as far as I can tell, and the sound went out, and so the two of us were able to just sort of talk, and I had my satire about college admissions out, and you had Crazy Rich Asians, which was a satire about an entire diaspora and, you know, culture that has changed. I think certainly the way films are made and received in Hollywood since then. So it's on the basis of that friendship, and also on your uncanny appreciation for the snobbery of WASPs, which is highlighted in Sex and Vanity, and which I really love. And I wanted to tell us a little bit about what it was like to finish off the trilogy of Crazy Rich Asians, to have that movie come out, to take the world by storm. I think, what are we, 5 million copies or something of Crazy Rich Asians in the world, 30 languages, Julie said. To go back to your desk and dig back in with something that is entirely new, Sex and Vanity. What was that like, and where did you begin?
You know, it was welcome relief, actually. I had finished a trilogy, I think in 2017, I think was when I stopped writing, you know, and over 1,000 words for those 3 books. And I needed a break and I wanted to try something different. And I went into the Hollywood world of writing for film and TV.
Right.
And I did not realize what a Sisyphean challenge that would be.
How so?
You know, you think publishing is hard.
It is. For me, it is.
It is very hard. And then you go into Hollywood, where, you know, you realize how spoilt you are as a writer in publishing, because there are there are much fewer people to contend with.
Right.
You know, you have an editor, you have a publisher, sometimes maybe the PR people chime in, but on the most, you know, on the whole, you get to create the world you want in your books. In TV, it's an industry. It's a world of people who are all chiming in.
Yes.
And each time they chime in, you have to change what they want you to change. And so I had been on this hamster wheel for quite a while, having fun, mind you, having fun. I loved being in a collaborative process with other writers. I loved being in writers' rooms. But at some point I was like, okay, I'm going to take a step back and go write this book. Give me a few months to disappear and do that. And they very kindly allowed me to do that. And it was such a relief to be in a different zone, in a different headspace. And also the bigger question, which you had really addressed, was what was it like doing something post Crazy Rich Asians? And it was really fun, actually. Crazy Rich Asians was such a heavy job for me, I have to say, because it's so layered in with my past, with my childhood, with my history, with
Mm.
family, and everything I did in those 3 books was so deliberate. Every word I chose, every scene I chose. And there was so much in it because so much of it is really inspired by true stories and real people. I really had to take great care to protect those stories and protect those people. I didn't want to do a hatchet job, number one. I'm not out to expose anyone. I'm out to satirize a world. But how to do that purposefully and carefully
And without being cruel.
without being cruel, that took a lot out of me, you know? So to come into Sex and Vanity, which is to me a completely different territory where I have no stake in, you know. I am not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant card-carrying member of Piping Rock Country Club, right? I can just look at it and have fun. And once again, not be cruel, but I didn't have to overthink things in a way. There was a lot of freedom in where I could go and what I could do in
Right.
the telling of this story that I didn't have with the first trilogy. And of course, it's all self-imposed, right? We're all in our own little headspace in our own little prisons. But here, I wanted to write a fun summer book, a sexy, fun summer book that would make people laugh.
Yes.
That would also make people think a little bit, but it was fun.
Who were you being faithful to, if anyone, with this book? If it was being faithful in terms of authenticity and care for some of the people you had known and grown up around, and also representing sort of the Asian diaspora, certainly at that level, for largely white American audiences who
Mhm.
weren't familiar with that at all, and then audiences around the world. How did that potential because I can relate to that certainly as a memoirist, right? But how did that potential reader shift once you brought the story stateside, and now we're not half British, half Singaporean. Now we're half WASP, and half
Mhm.
Chinese American, born in Seattle.
Yeah, I think this time I felt a responsibility to Hapas, to biracial Americans, to sort of do justice to telling a story that had all the sensitivities that it needed
Mhm,
to be authentic to an experience that is in no way monolithic. You
mhm,
know, um, everyone has a different experience growing up that's so dependent. Everyone that is Hapa, I should say, has a completely different experience. It's what I found from person to person. And I talked to so many friends and family members who are Harpa
mhm.
to really kind of glean from them, what was meaningful, what was painful, what was a challenge, what continues to be a challenge. So first and foremost, I wanted to do that justice. And then secondly, this is an homage to one of my favorite books of all time, E.M. Forster's A Room with a View. And it's interesting that the homage transformed midway through writing, and it became almost like a conversation with A Room with a View to me, you know. And so I wanted to honor that, but I also wanted to be able to make it my own and to change it up as much as I wanted to,
Mm.
you know.
So,
So
so Room with a View famously, and I know that you've read a ton of 19th and early to mid 20th century British literature, probably all of it, frankly, and that the novel of manners is your home ground. But Room with a View,
as I drink my tea,
yes, of
yes.
course, is it begins with an intrusive father and son pair in the pensione in Florence, right? Who offer Lucy Honeychurch, which is not a name that we could get away with, I think, now in the 20th century, right? But offer Lucy Honeychurch and her chaperone a better room, a room with a view of the Arno, of the river, right? Rather than the courtyard or the cortile or whatever it is that they're overlooking. And there's what it is that's intrusive about this father-son pair is something that I think is almost lost on a contemporary reader. It's pretty subtle, at least to me, sort of culturally. And I was interested to see, which of course is what makes this man both the perfect match for her and a terrible match for her, an impossible match for her, right? So you begin, and we're in Capri instead of in Florence, and I hope that you will tell us what that island means to you and how it came to, give birth to this. But the change is offered by George Zhao and his mom. And his mom is inappropriate in one way. She's nouveau, basically, right? She's very over the top, which is going to be problematic to Lucy, who's from on one side, from a very waspy American family. But also, I've read you say some interesting things about how the fact that George is himself Asian is perhaps something that Lucy, even unconsciously, is resistant toward. And I wonder if you'd say something about that. Were you aware of that? Was that a conscious choice? Is that just you writing people you know and love?
I mean, it's all of that. It was absolutely a conscious choice, but he had for me, he had to be Chinese, because she had to have this mirror held up to herself that really reflected back her Chinese side, the side that is so apparent and so visible, and yet that she's trying so hard to sublimate for the sake of fitting in with her waspy side. So, I really did change it up from the very beginning because, Forster is playing with Victorian mores here, right? In the intrusion of these two men into these gentle women's lives, and how you're not supposed to say something. You're not supposed to in any way imply or in any way obligate women. I'm playing a totally different game here, and my game is completely based on race and class.
George is the same class. I read George as the same class as Lucy. Did you not?
Well, she doesn't perceive it that way. I mean, technically they are. Right. But she feels like, he comes from he's a well brought up, well educated, Hong Kong kid from a respectable, wealthy Hong Kong family. She basically comes from the equivalent, but there is a further patina of snobbery imposed on her worldview, and that's the WASP hat that she's worn. Right. That translates his wealth as, it's nouveau somehow. It's vulgar somehow.
You can see it, right? I mean, there's something about visibility I thought that was particularly interesting, because the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy, I mean, and you are a designer, you are a visual writer and a visual thinker, and you've written about that. I'd love to hear you describe that. But surfaces signify for you, and of course, surfaces signify for all of us all the time. So it isn't as simple as labeling, designer tags the way a fashion magazine would. Each one of these tells us something about where someone fits in the society to which they belong, right? And they're also inside jokes and winks and nods. What's really interesting about having half of Lucy's family be from a culture that goes out of its way to pretend not to notice these things, not to care about these things, would never wear all of their jewelry every day, would never have their hair done, is fascinating, because you've brought the extravagance and the glamour and the fashion of the Crazy Rich Asian world. And we know that George has a ton of money, and his mom is talking about, the many different apartments and houses that they have in Hong Kong and Australia and everywhere else. But we also know
But the fact that she even mentions it, that's taboo to Lucy's sensibilities.
100%.
Right? 100%.
That should never, ever be off.
Yeah. The fact that the mother is wearing makeup, and when you meet her, a gigantic flamboyant hat is like, who is this creature? Exactly. You know what I mean? Exactly. And so she comes across as almost like an ogre in a way to Lucy's sensibilities. Right. And you flash back to Lucy Honeychurch in 1908, when George Emerson's father is the one to make this introduction. They're thinking, this is a free thinker. Oh my God. And he's addressing us publicly. He hasn't been introduced. He's shouting across the table. How dare he, shout across the table in a dining room at this pensione. So I took those niceties and I sort of brought them to what would be the equivalent now, right. And you add a little bit of spice on each side, and you really play that game on a whole new level, when you put in that racial element.
So knowing a little bit about your background, and knowing that you were born and raised in Singapore before you moved to Houston with your family as you were 11, right? 10 or 11. And then that you went to New York to study design at Parsons. And you've written a bit and spoken a bit about observing sort of American society, starting in the cafeteria of your middle school and then all the way up through New York City. And I'm wondering if you I mean, I sort of felt as though, you know, Lucy's awakening is kind of yours in reverse, but I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what that was like. You know, when did the young anthropologist begin, and when did you determine that satire was going to be your tool? Because there's another way to tell these stories that is much, much heavier and much more painful, and would frankly have been thematically consistent with the year we've just lived through. But you are a writer who seems committed to pleasure. You are committed to pleasure, and you don't consider that to be in any way a frivolous quality on the page or in life. And I wonder how you survived that move and how you came to make of it something joyful.
I mean, that's a whole hour there just with that question.
Awesome.
But it's interesting. As you said that, I'm reminded of my childhood in Singapore. And I think what connected me so much, first of all, to E.M. Forster's novel and its portrayal in the movie of the work, you know, the Merchant Ivory production of Room of View, was watching these women, you know, watching Maggie Smith as Charlotte Bartlett in, you know, I think she was nominated for an Oscar. I'm pretty sure she was. This incredibly comic but very restrained satirical performance. And she reminded me of so many people I knew in Singapore of the older generation. Their version of this very disapproving old money, you know, spinster lady who is constantly judging. And that voice has been with me since I was born. You know, I've been surrounded by these people. So I think I grew up, even as a baby, absorbing them as they criticize, as they chattered about people. And then I was taken out of that world abruptly when I was 11 years old. You know, my father didn't tell us we were moving until basically a month before we left, you know. And so for me, it was very sudden, it was very shocking, but you know, you're 11 years old. What are you going to do, right? And plus, it's kind of exciting, this big new adventure in America, the land of Knight Rider, you know, and Baywatch and all that. So here I am, transplanted to a world where that does not exist anymore. You know, Houston, Texas in the early 80s, mid 80s was very Southern. And you know how it is in the South. They kill you with kindness, you know. Bless your heart means you're an idiot, basically. And so everything is coded in a whole different way. It's coded with honey. People don't really say what they mean. And I had to get used to that. And it was a whole different mode of being until I moved to New York 10 years later, when I was 21.
How did it change?
It changed when a friend I made invited me for the weekend to the Hamptons to be with her family. And I remember I was excited because I was expecting the Hamptons to be, you know, huge white mansions by the sea. And there would be butlers everywhere serving, you know, champagne cocktails. And I had a fantasy of the Hamptons that was very kind of like MTV Cribs, you know. And the reality was not like that at all. The reality was, you know, old clapboard, New England houses, very dignified, old rattan, you know, cars that smell like dogs.
Yes.
And these women, these amazing weathered women who just, you know, criticized in the same Charlotte Bartlett way. So I felt comfortable. I was like, it was like a reversion back to like the old country where I was like,
the matriarchs.
Yeah.
These are the matriarchs who
I was like, these are my people. I may not look like them, but it was totally simpatico. And I think that's why I fit in so well. Like you know, with this crowd. Every weekend, of course, you know, like I didn't move in by any means, but I could understand and appreciate their sensibilities so much. And I knew the modes of behavior. And there was a kinship there. And then I could really see, wow, old WASP culture, old Singapore, it's one and the same, you know.
And the snobbery didn't strike you as offensive or nasty or mean-spirited.
No, it sure did. Of course it did. Absolutely, you know. But I was an observer. You know, I didn't know these people they were talking about.
Right.
I didn't know what they were
You know.
criticizing. Yeah.
You know.
You know, and they were criticizing, you know, the huge new houses that were being built, you know, in Sagaponack.
Right.
You know, the cost of a bottle of orange juice at the former farm stand turned luxury emporium. You know, they hated the change. They hated what the Hamptons was becoming and had been becoming for 100 years. You know, because there's a very famous, I think, commentary where someone goes, "Oh my God, the Hamptons, it's gone to seed. It's terrible now. The tourists come. Everyone's so vulgar." And you see the byline, and it's from 1918. You know.
Right. You told I read a really excellent interview, I thought, by a journalist named Ryan Bradley in The Atlantic. This was fairly recent. And you told him, "I am not a creative person. I'm an observer. I just see things and I soak things up." Obviously, you're a wildly creative person, but I wonder if you could tell us a bit about how this plays into all of the detail that ends up in your books. The sandal shop, you know, you even had a story that your editor prompted for the provenance of the Speedo that George wears when he climbs up out of the water the first time we see him. It seems as though everything is rooted in some beautiful display that you've seen before.
I've always been an intensely sort of visual creature, and I do have photographic memory. So, you know, I retain things, visual information so much, and it's very helpful when you're writing books, especially the kind of books I write, you know, where design and imagery is so all important. So that's always been a neat little trick that I've had. But I really do feel like I've always somehow been a fly on the wall in so many strange worlds and circumstances, and that's what I mine from. You know, if you ask me to create a fantasy novel from scratch, and create a whole world from scratch, I wouldn't be able to do it. You know, I have to write from observation. I have to write of places I know, things I've seen, you know, air that I've breathed. That's what I mean by just, you know, I don't have that creative streak where I can completely invent a character from out of thin air. I can't. Everything is always based on someone or a collection of people for me. Experiences are lived or observed, you know.
Yeah. I'm not sure that anybody ever does. You said that this is the first of a new trilogy. Where are you going next?
I'm going to London next. And it's an unconventional trilogy, and trilogies is a misleading word here because, you know, the story is complete at the end of Sex and Vanity.
For sure, yes.
Yeah. But it's a trilogy that's really joined by cities. And sort of each book is a Valentine to a different city. This one, of course, obviously to New York and Capri. The next book, London, will be the main city, and then there'll be another sort of resort town at play, and then the final book will be Paris.
Is there a literary model for the next two that you can share?
There are. So they will all also be sort of, you know, inspired by other great novels that I have loved.
And every little thing that we come across, let's start with Capri, every back set of stairs, every particular deck that overlooks every bay, all of that is true. And you've been to every one of those places.
Oh yeah, especially with Capri. Certainly. I mean, it's I've been fortunate enough to visit, you know, quite a number of times, and it's just one of these places. I was on a call earlier today, you know, with a journalist, and just sort of, it was a sort of weird travel type piece, so I could really literally walk her through the streets of my favorite spots from street to street. And because it's just such an evocative, inspiring island. It's inspired generations of writers for centuries, you know.
Yes. Have you been swimming in the Blue Grotto?
I personally have not. I'm still waiting to do that. I've been in the Blue Grotto in a boat,
In a boat. Okay.
Yeah, you can go after, well, I don't know if I'm officially supposed to say that. Locals, I hear,
Mhm.
have swum in the off hours. That should be the official line, right? I don't want to encourage people to do anything dangerous.
That's it.
Yeah, but
That's
it's eminently swimmable, and perhaps one day I can jump out of that boat and be in the waters myself.
I was thinking about how you are so attuned to beautiful things, the design of their house in the West Village, and obviously over the top beautiful things too, the clothing that everybody wears, right down to the labels, and the language of the arts, the decorative arts, designer arts, is the language of money. And it's the language of money for two reasons, of course. The first is because we use it to signal our exclusivity or our ability to consume, some of us more than others. The other is that those things are expensive. You know, those things are precious. Those things really matter. So I wondered if you thought about, I mean, of course you do, but in what way do you think about how design signifies? Is it just, I'm going to throw, you know, it looks like a Versace blew up in my room. Is it a bonanza for us, or is this coded in a certain way for us? What sort of pleasure are you having with it as the writer?
I mean, it's so highly coded. And I think the higher up you get in those ivory towers of prestige, the more coded it gets. You know, I was at a restaurant a couple of days ago, eating outside, I might add, and the waiter was leading a new group outside, you know, to be seated. And I noticed two women, and they were each carrying an Hermes Birkin bag. But it was not just carrying the bag, it was how they were carrying it. The way they had hooked their arms into, you know, the handle.
Yes.
And more importantly, the bags were open. The bags were flung wide open. You know, the buckles were unbuckled. It had to look disheveled.
So you can see the stitching on the inside, which is what.
It's more that just how it sort of accordions out, you know?
Yes. Okay.
It's this sort of very casual throwaway, like, oh, I just grabbed my bag out of the back seat of my car and I didn't even have time to to close it. But
Right.
it's so studied and purposeful. And they were both doing it sort of perfectly. And I was like, that is so obnoxious. I mean, that was just, you know, my thought. You know, here you are with your $30,000 handbag. Actually, they're more now, right? They're like 75,000, I believe.
Well, I
And you
think
can't even get them.
it depends on the material.
Yeah. But I think the starter is like 75, I
It's
think, now for a
become a
Birkin.
significant commodity,
Yeah,
actually,
it does.
over the last couple of years. So this is actually an investment piece, right?
Exactly. Just like art now has become the ultimate prize, the ultimate investment, contemporary art, you know, in the world of the super rich. And it's not enough to have the best designers and the best architects of your home. It's what's up on the wall, you know.
So here's the magic. Here's the Kevin Kwan alchemy for me, is that you will observe those ladies headed out to the terrace. And that would drive me bananas if I saw that. Everything about that. I would have leaned to my husband and said, you know, do you know what those handbags are worth? And he wouldn't have believed me. And then I would have gone on. I hope I wouldn't have, but I probably would have. But in your book, when those characters show up, we will see them do that. We will be treated to a lavish description of the bags and exactly how they're carrying them so that we understand what they're signaling. And we won't hate them. In fact, we'll love them and we'll wish we could sit down at their table and hear what they say next. And that's the genius of it, is how you manage to defang something, even and especially in a time when it's pretty provocative, frankly, to be flashing around a lot of wealth. And people who do are not inviting companionship and community and company. And yet in your books, these people, for the most part, are delicious. I mean, some of them are pretty horrible, but they're not horrible because of how they wear their wealth. They're horrible because of how they treat each other, right? So that's the kind of taming and mollifying influence that you have that I think mellows things and makes it so fun to read. And I have no idea still how you do that. Do you know how you do that?
I really don't. I mean, I'm really thinking about it now for the first time because no one's ever presented it to me quite like that. I'm not out to get anyone, you know, first and foremost. But I really do hope that these books don't add up to a glorification of this world.
I don't think they did.
You know what I mean? Like I'm, you know, there is some commentary in there to me that really shows how ridiculous and at times obscene things can be. Right. And you do see beyond the surface and the gloss and the labels that a lot of these people, most of these people, are extremely, extremely unhappy and messed up.
Right.
And a lot of them, it's about their transformation into joy, into happiness. You know, my Lucy has everything going for her in the world, and yet she is so conflicted. She is so tormented. There's so much unaddressed grief in her life. And it doesn't allow her to really actualize a real adult relationship with another man. You know, that's what I wanted to look at.
She's the first artist you've given us, isn't she? Is she the first artist heroine? I think she is.
That actually does art? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's a painter, and,
Yeah.
and there's a very moving moment where George sees something in her work
Mhm.
that perhaps she hadn't seen herself, and there is some this thematically there are a lot of missing fathers in your work. These are matriarchal clans, you know,
Mhm.
regardless of where they are based and what they are up to, and that's always struck me as interesting too. That there is sort of the absence of the patriarchal role in certain ways. It makes other things easier, you know, for you to have happen. But it also puts a lot of authority into women where ordinarily it wouldn't be in these
Mhm.
communities. But I was interested that you gave Lucy her own aesthetic genius, frankly, because that's not, I mean, you've had character genius and great wit and great intelligence.
Mhm.
Rachel Chu is brilliant. She's genius. But with Lucy, we have a little bit more of a dreamer, and it felt like you loved her a lot.
I appreciate her, you know, and I see that so much of her inability to express herself can only come out in her paintings. And yet she too is unaware of that. You know, they're so raw and they're so naked in a way that would horrify her if she actually saw the reality of it. And I think so much of that is always in our creative process. You know, we see each other in our creative works in a way that sometimes we don't reveal in person, you know. And that's the paradox of Lucy that I do love about her. You know, it's interesting because she's the first heroine out of 4 books now that is much more controversial than previous heroines. Rachel Chu is pretty much universally beloved. Astrid Liang is deified. You know what I mean? Lucy, it's hilarious. Like some of the comments that I've been passed along to me, you know, like someone commented that they read the whole book because they hated Lucy through every scene. You know, why does she keep making all these decisions? Why does she do what she does? You know, I had a very smart reporter actually in an interview last week, you know, say that at some point she does something that really jumped the shark for him, and he got so angry. He got so angry he wanted to throw the book.
That's a good sign
Um,
reader, I think.
yeah,
You know,
and
but
I was like, well, it's to me, you know, it's working, I guess. You know,
yeah.
if you hate her that much, you know what I mean, over, you know, no spoilers here, over something that to me is actually so ridiculous. Something's working and something's triggering you that has nothing to do with me at all.
I have a
Right?
theory
Yeah.
about this. Yeah, that we don't need to go into too much because we don't want to try to identify the people passing along these notes to you. I don't know who they are, and perhaps we should work on your firewall a little bit. But I do think it's flattering. I do think it's interesting. I think that the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy for those of us who are white American readers and who don't have much experience, if any at all, with that world. I mean, I had no idea, you know, that anything like that existed, and have subsequently met people who grew up in that way and who wear more jewelry on their hands than I've ever seen in a storefront, you know, and that is how they give me a hard time and say, you know, this is how women carry wealth in my family. How do they do it in yours? You know, I think it was easy to watch those characters be as madcap as they wanted to be because we didn't claim to know them and we don't have to worry about them because they have very little connection to a native power structure, if I can use the word native for myself subjectively.
Mhm.
Lucy's different, you know. Lucy's an American girl, right? Lucy's an American girl growing up in a complicated family with a Chinese American mom who does everything in her power to not be, in her own words, a tiger mom, right?
Mhm.
And therefore, I think we might imagine we have some claim on how Lucy should operate or think that we wouldn't otherwise assume, you know.
It's very activating, and I've actually, yeah, some you know, some commenters have actually said sort of like, how dare you, you know,
Really?
stay in your lane, you know, just keep writing about those Asians.
Did you
And
have
like
like
how
a WASP sensitivity reader to make sure you got it right?
obviously, you know, obviously I've hit a nerve, and
Right.
it's just it's been interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I wanted to do with this new trilogy. You know, I spent 3 books talking about Asians in Asia, and now I'm really looking at the Asian experience outside of Asia,
Yeah.
Asians in the West, and that collision and what
And
happens.
that collision. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So what was the most fun part of this to write? Your favorite pages? Because you wrote the whole thing in like 4 months, right? Where you
Yeah.
spent 10 hours a day, and that's amazing. So what was the most fun? What just flew out of you?
Yeah, you know, it's always the obnoxious characters.
Like Mordecai?
That Mordecai was not supposed to exist, right? Mordecai is my redux of the Reverend Eager
Yes.
from E.M. Forster's novel, and he appears in one paragraph here or there.
Pedantic and
Yeah. He's a very, very minor role there, but in my book, he just sort of came to life, you know. Like we met him at the dock, and I wrote him into the dock scene when they all go on an excursion. We meet this ridiculous character named Baron Mordecai von Ephrussi, and somehow just it was like I got a download, you know, and I just had to let him rip.
is he the one who
And
started at Weatherby? He started at Weatherby and
yes,
then Harrow. So
yeah.
is he going to show up in London? Are we going to get to Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. He totally might. He absolutely might. Yeah, but it's I don't know. There's something. I guess maybe it's the psychology of people who are extreme snobs that really fascinate me, and I love effing with them. You
Well,
know,
he's an intellectual.
I do it in real life also. You know,
Yeah, but do you?
whenever I meet really pretentious people, I just love just really kind of screwing with them. I don't know. That's my little
Is there any
naughty
videos
boy.
you can refer us to? Are there any instances of this that we can look up? Because that would be a great. I know you will have encountered a lot of very, very snobby people,
Yeah.
you know, on your film trail. So I see Julia's coming back in. Are you about to cut us off?
No, you can keep going. Do you have another burning
No.
question?
I do. Well, I want to
Okay.
ask about the movie of this, and I know that we've been in lockdown, and I know that you have 2 other Crazy Rich Asian films in pre-production. I know that you are working on 6,000 television shows at the same time. But I'm wondering if we are going to get to see Lucy and George fall in love on the screen.
I really hope so. I think we might. Sony, you know, has loved this project from the very beginning. They snapped up the film rights, and they and SK Global, the production company, have been going full steam ahead. And they hired an amazing screenwriter. I'm not allowed to reveal who it is, unfortunately, because, you know, Hollywood being Hollywood, but someone truly stellar is working on adapting Sex and Vanity. I can't wait to see what this person does. They're full steam ahead. I think they're like almost done, I think. So we'll see, right? And I think now it's a matter of scheduling. When
And
Capri opens up this week, I believe.
really,
Of course, I think we're gonna miss the summer filming season, but we'll, you know, it's not up to me, but we'll see, you know, when people can actually make this happen. But there's a high chance that, you know, knock on wood, we will see this on the big screen.
it would be so beautiful.
So exciting.
It'll be fun to cast.
I love that you get to fuck with people, and that's my favorite part of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, Cecil Pike is obviously Army Hammer, right? We know this, don't we? I mean, no, like, I guess not anymore. I guess maybe that's changed. Do we know who Cecil's
Oh,
gonna be?
yeah.
I mean, who's Cecil gonna be? No, I forgot about that. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, it'll make for very interesting casting conversations.
See who stays out of the headlines long enough to be cast as Cecil. That would be
A revolving door.
right. Cornelia Guest appearing as herself, and then of course there's this.
That would be so fun and so meta, wouldn't it?
It would be incredible, but it would be very much in keeping. And there's a wasp who goes by Khaki. What is Khaki's real name? Cathcart.
Kathleen. Yeah.
Kathleen McCathcart.
Yeah.
Cabot, right? There's a Cabot in there. She's
Yeah.
the Boston side. And I told you there is a Khaki actually, and she did go to Yale. And the story that I heard is that her wedding, which was on a private island in the Thousand Islands area.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the only acceptable place to have a private island.
The bridesmaids were motored out and then had to swim. I'm not making this up. to the docks, because that's just what you do up there. And so like the Wasp anyway, and contrasting that with the speedboats, these what are they called, minnow ribs,
Crafts and little
speedboats that you have in Capri taking people across the waves.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to know who Khaki is going to be. I mean, it would have been Candace Bergen, I think, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Anyway,
Laura Linney.
You would do it, but she's so nice, isn't she? Do you think
She is?
But I thought she's could have a good little
enough to pull that off. I don't know. But I actually know many women who could actually do that, who are that, and who could step right in. And it would be such fun to send you their names. But
well, speaking of names, I mean, do you pilfer names from real people, or are these just like completely made up?
I play name games. I really do. And actually with the most recent book, I called up a really good friend who comes from, High Wasp, right? And I was like, please just give me the most ridiculous names, that you know. And he came up with Anna-Fred. And I don't know why. Anna-Fred just makes me laugh. Just the name itself. I don't know if it really exists, but I'm laughing just thinking about it, So Khaki, Anna-Fred, all those, we had a lot of fun. We really had a lot of fun coming up with the names.
Because names are a big part of a book and a character. And that's a really fun,
Yeah. But you also want them to be authentic and true, right? So the fact that Lacy knows a real Khaki that really did go to Yale,
I've been told about her. I've never met her. So
it's amazing. Yeah, it's not the same Khaki. Let's just.
I was just gonna say, is Khaki gonna be calling you and saying, "I did not do"?
Yeah.
Which do any of your friends or people talk to you and say, "Is that me? Is that part written about me?" Do you have people do that? To you?
It's interesting because I think 99% of my friends do not read my books. They really don't. You know what I mean? It's still a shock to them. To most of my friends that I actually write books as a hobby. You know what I mean?
What do they think you do?
Well, how do I put it this way? Most of my friends are amazing creative geniuses.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They really are.
The guy that I took the camera from at Warwick's, who was some extremely famous photographer.
Museum. Yeah, his work is in museums. So I photograph friends.
Directing him at Warwick's. I'm like, oh no, can you get this?
Choreographers. These are people who exist on a different cultural plane. So they don't read my books.
Oh my goodness.
They love me and they appreciate me, but they don't read my books.
Do the brands try to pay you for placement? They do, don't they?
No. Are you kidding me?
They
don't. No. And I would never do that.
I know you wouldn't. Yeah. They haven't.
No one's ever approached me.
Really?
No one's ever approached me. Authors mean nothing. They really don't.
Authors, though.
They really don't.
You're kind of in
actors,
that
rappers, TikTokers, yes, they'll pay them gazillions of dollars to flash a bag of Cheetos on something, but authors are just completely, sorry, right? But no surprise to you. Like no one,
Which
no
is
one
just
thinks
so
of us.
well, it's so
Definitely not a
amazing to
surprise
me
to me.
because too, even like with, I mean, and you've
Yeah.
had some different things experienced with the movies than I think the average author does.
Mhm.
But average authors don't even get half the time they're not recognized even as any part of the movie. You know, it's like this like side footnote, which is just
It's
crazy.
crazy, but it's so true.
Yeah.
You know, you're sort of irrelevant as
Yeah.
an author
Just
for
want to let you know too,
yeah.
Maggie Smith did get, I Googled, she did get a nomination for the Academy Award for that. So
Yeah.
when you were asking if she was that. And my favorite thing tonight is hate read. When you said that, I was like, oh my God, I can so relate to that. That's my new term that's going to be when I hate read something.
Yeah,
Okay,
someone
so
did a screenshot of a comment from social media and had to send it to me, like a friend, just like, have you seen this? And I don't ever read my comments,
right.
but I just read it and I just had, I actually enjoy it when people really hate my books.
Sadistic part of you.
Yeah.
It's like, I got them and I got them good. Okay, so we do have a couple questions in the chat. So we talked a little bit about this going and what production's happening with that, but somebody wants to know the follow-up for Crazy Rich Asians, and do you have any news on when any of those would be?
I wish I could answer that question. I really can't. Because it's a secret, right? Because the studios want to surprise when they want to surprise. And
right.
I will tell you, it's in development. A lot of great work is happening. Cool things are happening.
It's going to be as big and as good.
It's going to be, totally.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to take the time to get it right,
right,
and get the script right, and get everything, perfect before we hit play.
And I have to tell you, I mean, Crazy Rich Asians, I think, is going to be like, I mean, I'm old and we're a little antiquated at our house, so we still flip through channels. And so it's kind of like when I go back to like the 80s movies like Breakfast Club or 16 Candles, I always stop. Crazy Rich Asians is becoming that for us. It's like every time we kind of scroll through, it's like wherever it's at, you like stop and watch.
It's like on TBS, it's on TNT, it's
right.
It's on HBO. It's amazing to see it take on this whole new life on TV, and people still send me screenshots of like, look, I turned on the TV and here it is, and it's like,
but it's becoming that thing that I think that's going to live through, like, I mean, those other movies I mentioned were like in the 80s. I think that Crazy Rich Asians is going to be that, where you're just scrolling through and you're always going to stop and watch, because it's just a visual is so wonderful. The story, it's just a perfect thing. It's so, it must be kind of fun to be in that lexicon kind of thing with that. So Jim wants to know, have you thought about writing a series on Astrid?
I have, and I just might. She's a truly compelling character that I absolutely love, and I wish I had the time and the ability to write a book and have one out every month, but I don't. Books really take it out of me. And I'm committed to this trilogy, so but after this trilogy there might be an Astrid trilogy.
Are you on deadline for this, Kevin? You're on, like, you actually, like, Doubleday wants it when Doubleday wants it?
I mean, there's a conceptual deadline, I think the pandemic has changed everything, right? I actually told them that I need time to do research. I need time to travel, and I have to be in London to do that research. And we can't go to London yet. So until that happens, I can't begin to do the research. So that's my excuse. That's the equivalent of dog ate my homework.
I love it.
Well,
it's a good excuse.
It also allows the brands to evolve, because I think sometimes they, over the course of a couple of years, some of them will actually surge forward a little bit. And so you'll be able to see exactly what it is that's being draped over people's arms. So there was a French house. Somebody had a handbag from a French house that I'd never heard of, that I had to look up.
Moana.
Yes. Yeah. This is, I mean, where have I been apparently for the last 150 years or something? So I don't know if they've just done a fabulous redesign or what, but, and I also wonder if you have a little notebook. I guess you have a photographic memory. So, you know these things, right?
Yeah. Well, Bernard Arnault, who owns LVMH, he actually bought Moana a few years ago for himself, not as part of LVMH, but he loves the brand so much that he is personally involved in trying to reinvigorate this very historic French luggage company, from the, I think they started in 1910. and it's beautiful, beautiful stuff. And very discreet. So
I
let's
love
let's
that
see. Let's see if he
you're
succeeds.
revitalizing these like old
Yeah.
craftsman, shops.
Yeah.
I have to ask if Burberry is going to figure largely in London. Is it? It has to. I have to tell you. I mean, the
Look at
trend.
him. Look at.
I mean, the trenches were designed for troops going over the top.
Yeah.
Or they were designed for Shackleton, right? I mean, it's a gorgeous, iconic. Anyway, I just think you could have a lot of fun with that. I don't know who would wear one. I hope it's not Mordecai.
Well, if you want to connect them to me, I will happily entertain that. Yeah,
of course.
totally.
But yeah, it's funny because when you were talking, Lacy, about like Kevin, if he has a notebook, it's like you got to be careful if you're in some of swanky hotels, if Kevin's behind you, like writing some notes, watching some of these. It's like you have to just kind of like walk by and scope it out.
I don't actually spend much time in swanky hotels, but thank you for thinking that I do.
What can you divulge what part of the world you're coming in from us right now? Can you tell us what like?
I'm in exotic Los Angeles.
Okay. There you go. All right.
Very, very
like
exotic. Yeah.
I like it. Well, some parts of it can be.
Yeah. Where most of the hotels have not reopened their public areas yet.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
LA kind of got hit a little. LA wasn't quite as bad as San Francisco, but it was a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit longer. And just a closing question, because we're running out of time here. So writing Crazy Rich Asians, did you always think that you were going to be a writer when you were like, when did that come to you? When you thought it's like,
I always drew and I always loved art. And that was kind of like my consuming passion as a kid. And then in my teen years, I was really into marine biology. I thought I was going to become a marine biologist.
Wow.
So I veered totally in a whole different direction. I was going to go to UT Galveston.
Wow.
And join a dive crew.
I love that visual.
Yeah. But then in my senior year of high school, I had an amazing English teacher who introduced me to creative writing, and that was the first time I actually kind of wrote creatively and found that I could do it pretty well. And then I
love teachers.
Everything veered that way, and I got a journalism and literature degree. And from that point out, I wanted to write, but I didn't know how to make a living writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the writing degree, and then it's like, what do you do with it? You can't really do much with it, right? So
yeah,
I spent another 15 years going another lap into a whole different world of design and consulting and photography before coming back to writing. So, it was in me. It just had to find a way.
Fermented.
Yeah.
But we love those teachers. We
really do.
We love those teachers
really
that
do.
can spark that. That can spark that in young minds. So Kevin, it's always so great hosting you. Just adore having you come to virtual Warwick's, whatever Warwick's.
Truly. I can't wait to come to Warwick's in person and shop in your beautiful store and spend, a few hours just going through all the amazing shelves and finding out new stuff. So, it's interesting. There are so many bookstores that just, for whatever reason, they don't know how to merchandise. Something happens, it's not intentional, but
right.
I you guys have that secret sauce where every time I come, I discover books. I want to pick that up. I want to buy stuff from you. And I don't get that from a lot of many bookstores where it's just like the magic is off,
Right.
So
Warwick's
you can bottle it and sell it. That'd be great.
Our buyer, Adrian, I have to say, she's retiring next year. And it's like, it scares me a little bit because she does do a fabulous job of what she buys and how she is absolutely one of those people that visualizes when she's buying the merchandising of it.
Where it's going to go in the store.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's also the store itself and the light and the way the light comes in through the windows and where you're at. And,
Well, that was Nancy Warwick. We actually did a big, there were some of us that got together and the customers, we actually bought the building so that we could stay in that building.
Yeah.
It was a pretty big deal. So
I was so happy to hear that news. So congratulations.
Yeah. So that was a pretty big deal. And Lacy, love you. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is always, this trio right here, this duo is always one of my favorite things too.
Kevin is a writer who writes joyfully. And a lot of writers don't, they write crucially, but not joyfully. And it's so helpful. It's like therapy. Reading Kevin's work and
you're so sweet.
Well, you're
Yeah.
you're not always imperiled. You know,
No.
you're telling stories, and
Yep.
God, do we need to hear
So
stories?
we need it.
We
Yeah.
need it. So it's such an honor for me to be.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
All
Wish we
right.
could do it more.
Me too. When I close this, we go away so we don't go back into a green room. So we kind of end the evening right here. So Lacy, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Kevin,
Thank you.
until the next book. Thank you.
Congratulations. Yes. See you next year.
All right. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Errol.